Opinions expressed on this program are those of the host, guests, and callers, and not necessarily those of Salem Communications, staff, management, or advertisers. Activist Radio is on the air. You've tuned into the Mark Harrington Show, sponsored by Created Equal. Mark is training a new generation of leaders to take on the culture of death and win.
All right!
If you don't like abortion, don't have one.
The only thing that can be said to be objective truth is that there is no objective truth.
It does come out in one piece. It comes out in one piece.
I would argue that we certainly are not all created equal.
And now, here's Mark.
That's right, your voice of resistance. Your radio activist Mark Harrington on the air. All right, we got another rockin' program for you today. We're going to be talking about what's happening in the quote, unquote, Christian community on college campuses, and specifically what recently took place at Indiana Wesleyan University. There was a forum on the abortion issue recently, where my colleague, Seth Dreyer, who's our training director, and Michael Spencer, who is the speaker for Life Training Institute, the group that Scott Klusendorf heads up, and I've had Scott on the program here before, discussed the issue of abortion in a panel discussion called Life versus Choice. And in this panel discussion, there was a professor, Dr. Fiebeg, and we're going to discuss some of his comments, if you will, during this forum that we captured on video, and we'll be playing the audio for you here today to discuss the sentiment. And then we will not broad brush the Christian colleges with this program, but I think it does point out a concern that I have, and I hope all of us share, and that the institutions of Christian learning, universities, colleges, for that matter, our churches, are we losing our ability to understand what biblical authority is and what the Bible teaches on specific issues that matter? That's really what we want to get to today. We're going to discuss that today on the Mark Harrington Show. And so what I'd like to do is dive right in here, and I'm going to play the audio clip. Now, this is an excerpt of a longer video that you can find on our YouTube page. And to find that, you go to createdequal.net, and you click on the YouTube icon, and there you'll see the entire forum conversation on our YouTube page. This is an excerpt, so it is edited, but it is true to what happened at the forum at a specific instance during the conversation when this professor was asked questions about his position on abortion. And we'll let Dr. Fiebeg speak for himself. And also you will hear my colleague Seth Dreyer ask a question of Dr. Fiebeg, and also Michael Spencer. And then we'll turn to Michael and we'll have a bit of discussion about this interchange between these gentlemen. So here you go. This is Dr. Fiebeg, who's a professor at the Indiana Wesleyan University in Indiana, a Christian college, and this is a forum on life versus choice.
I don't know if you know what cognitive dissonance is. It's somebody who holds two opposing views equally. I am equally pro-choice and pro-life. And then they drive people crazy. This is our belief that life begins at conception. It is not the world's belief. And so if we start telling the world how to live their lives and hold them to a morality that we believe, that is a little bit akin to playing the Holy Spirit.
You said you are equally pro-choice and pro-life. I just wonder how that might affect as we change the term slightly, not being talking about preborn humans, but sex trafficking. And I said I was equally pro-choice and pro-life when it comes to the life of young girls not to be trafficked? Or what about blacks? I'm equally pro-choice and pro-life with slavery. We said that is inadequate. Why? Because we know that young girls are humans. We know that African Americans are humans. So if Mike's evidence stands that preborn are human beings, and therefore it is not adequate to say you are equally pro-life and pro-choice, unless there's good reason to believe that we don't know they're humans. But again, I haven't heard the empirical evidence tonight. So either we will defend their rights or we'll say they are fit for being killed. There is no neutrality in this.
The bottom line is your position really is the classic pro-choice position. And I'll just ask it to get clarity, because maybe I am misunderstanding it. So maybe you can just answer this. Is it your position that you think abortion should remain legal, or would you like to see that illegal?
I will say this. We just elected a Republican Congress. You're not going to see abortion go away.
Yeah, that's not my question. I agree with that. But I wanted to know, in an ideal world, would you like to see it illegal?
It has been illegal in the past. It did not.
I know that, but I'm asking you a specific question. Would you like to see it illegal again?
I am not prepared to go that direction right now.
Well, there you go. That's the audio, and again, I apologize for the quality of it. That's taken from a video that was recorded at this forum at IWU, which is Indiana University, or Indiana Wesleyan University in Indiana, on this life versus choice debate with Dr. Fiebeg and Seth Dreher and Michael Spencer, among others. Now, since then, and I'll just and then I'll turn to my guest, Michael Spencer, here in a minute. But Dr. Fiebeg, after this conversation, this forum, wrote a letter to the student newspaper to carry on, to kind of clarify, if you will, his pro-choice position. And he says this, and this is just an excerpt from his letter. My pro-choice position comes from an understanding of the fall of man in the book of Genesis. And then he recites Genesis chapter 2 verses 15 and so on, and he says, and this is he again quoting this, and he says, the Lord God took the man and put him in the garden of Eden to work and take care of it. And the Lord God commanded the man and said, quote, you are free to eat from any garden or any tree in the garden, but you must not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And when you eat from it, you will certainly die. And then he says, while God certainly indicated and commanded that Adam and Eve were not to eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, he allowed them the freedom of choice to do so. So that's Dr. Fiebeg's interpretation of Genesis chapter 2, verses 15. And I think that leads us to our guest here, Michael Spencer, is on the phone with me. Michael is the speaker for Life Training Institute, which trains the next generation of leaders in pro-life apologetics. Michael is also a former pastor. Mike, thanks for being on the Mark Harrington Show.
Well, hey, Mark, thanks for having me on. It's great to be on with you today.
I appreciate you having it on, Mike. Let's do this. I want to just kind of go step by step through the statements of Dr. Fiebeg. He's a Christian professor at a Christian college, Indiana Wesleyan University. And this forum was set up to discuss pro-life issues, and you would think that Dr. Fiebeg would come with a pro-life position. Well, he didn't. And if you can, from the audio, he basically says that he takes a position that he is equally pro-life and pro-choice. What's the problem with that?
Well, yeah, and not only is he a professor at a Christian university, but he's also, as I understand it, a former pastor as well, and certainly should know the scriptures better than he seems to. He refers to his position of being equally pro-life and equally pro-choice as cognitive dissonance. It's mistaken. Definition of a so-called middle ground position. Rather, it's the practice of holding. It's the distress, I should say, or the mental stress that comes from trying to hold two convergent or two opposing conflicting views. So he's really misunderstood on his definition of cognitive dissonance. But the reality is that there is no middle ground position. At the end of the day, Dr. Fiebeg, as well as anybody else who would claim the pro-choice position, would have to admit that they either want to see the preborn legally protected or they do not. And it appears that Dr. Fiebeg does not. He was unwilling to state that night, but he did clearly state that he was pro-choice. He said that he did not come prepared to debate the issue, and so he wasn't prepared to answer the question on whether or not the preborn deserve legal protection. And I think it's unfortunate that somebody has to be prepared for a debate to answer a simple question like that.
My guest is Michael Spencer. He's a speaker for Life Training Institute. You can go to prolifetraining.com and find out more about their organization. Michael is also a former pastor. Mike, you have some experience as well with Indiana Wesleyan University, some history there. Would you explain what you know about that school?
Well, yeah. I mean, I certainly care about this school. My daughter's a graduate of Indiana Wesleyan, and about 3 years ago when she was a student there, one of her professors, it was not Dr. Fiebeg, but another professor actually invited a Planned Parenthood employee or spokesperson onto the campus and into that classroom to present teaching on the subject of birth control. And she did defend their work as an abortion provider as well. My daughter was grieved by this, and so contacted the professor after class and asked if she could bring in the other side, and so I was invited in. I was grateful for that opportunity, but the fact that Indiana Wesleyan has done this is certainly cause for concern. Now, I don't know to what extent the administration knows that these things are going on. I'd like to give them the benefit of the doubt. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see how they respond to this current situation with Dr. Fiebeg, whether or not they will hold their professors accountable to their policies, or whether or not they will continue to allow professors to erode the sanctity or the sacredness of human life on their campus. So that remains to be seen. But it certainly is discouraging that Dr. Fiebeg and at least one other professor seem to be very warm to the pro-choice view.
My guest is Mike Spencer, and he's with Life Training Institute, and we're talking about this controversy at Indiana Wesleyan University where Dr. Fiebeg, as a professor, has come out and basically said he's pro-choice, that he can hold an equally pro-life and pro-choice position, which are obviously are contradictory views, but that was his position that day at the forum, and since then there's been a little bit of consternation, a lot of debate, video's been out, now there's been a letter to the editor and some follow-up letters written. Michael, I want to deal more with the substance, then I want to go to the broader picture of college, Christian colleges generally. I think that's the bigger problem here. I want to address that with you. But let's just go back to some of his questions. Can you really be pro-choice and pro-life as a believer in Jesus Christ?
No, this is a myth to think that you could hold both positions. Again, one either believes that the unborn are worthy of protection, legal protection, because they are distinct, living, and whole human beings, full-fledged members of the human community, or they do not believe that. And so, no, this is a myth to think that one could be pro-choice and pro-life. And frankly, Dr. Fiebeg has made very, very bold statements in that panel discussion that you referenced at the outset there at the beginning of your show. And your listeners can go there and hear that for themselves. But he's made very, very strong statements saying that he is strongly pro-choice and that he defends that, as you alluded to earlier, he defends that biblically, referring to Genesis chapter 2 in order to do so.
We're going to talk about that particular passage on the other side. You're listening to Mark Harrington here on The Mark Harrington Show, your voice of resistance. We'll be right back.
What do other pro-life leaders think of Mark Harrington and Created Equal? Listen to Scott Klusendorf of Life Training Institute.
Created Equal is about changing this culture, and that's what we have to do if we are going to win this fight. And Mark and Seth and the others on the team of Created Equal are doing just that. And I am happy to endorse their work. Glad to call them fellow companions in this fight for the life of the unborn. And I certainly hope you will support and work with them as they work on reforming this culture so that it has an appreciation for human life.
Mark Harrington is a missionary and free speaker speech advocate, and Mark has been on the front line of the debate over abortion for over 20 years. Mark needs your prayers and financial support. Please support Mark and Created Equal by going to createdequal.net or send a check to Created Equal, Post Office Box 360502, Columbus, Ohio 43230. Your gifts are tax deductible.
We're talking about professors on Christian colleges today on the Mark Harrington Show, and the broader problem of not treating abortion as murder in the Christian church and the community of Christians, and this whole issue of moral relativism. My guest is Michael Spencer. He's a speaker for Life Training Institute, and he was part of a forum at Indiana Wesleyan University on life versus choice. And one of the professors there was Dr. Greg Fiebeg, and he came out with a position that he was pro-choice and defended it not only at the forum but in a letter to the editor afterwards, and even to his own classes. So, Mike, I want to jump into this so-called scriptural defense that Dr. Fiebeg makes for his pro-choice position. He basically says because Adam chose and had the freedom to choose, therefore it's okay for people to choose abortion. Am I wrong in his position?
No, that is his position, and Dr. Fiebeg is confused because one's freedom to choose evil does not mean that one has the moral right to do evil, nor does this exempt the state from their God-given responsibility to mitigate evil and to protect the innocent.
Right.
And so, it was confusing that night during the panel discussion because we were trying to make the point to him that nobody's debating the fact that we have the freedom to choose to do evil. That's not a question. Any thinking person knows that we have that freedom because there's so much evil all around us, and we've all chosen it ourselves on some level. What we were trying to point out was that, again, because somebody has the freedom to choose evil, because God has given us that freedom, He has not given us the right to do moral wrongs. And this is where he's very confused. And I don't, I'm not questioning his motives or his sincerity. I don't know the man. I can't make those comments. But he's very confused on his position here. He's ignoring the fact, too, that 2 chapters later, he's referencing Genesis 2 to defend this position. And 2 chapters later, he ignores the fact that Adam and Eve's children are killing each other. Mm-hmm. And every, for instance, Andrea Yates had the freedom to choose to drown her 5 children, but she did not have the moral right before God to do so. And the laws that are in place to protect children from those kinds of actions are good laws. And so if Andrea Yates' children should be protected by law, at least to the extent that law can protect anybody from these things, so should every other child, born or unborn, be protected by those laws.
My guess is Mike Spencer. He's with Life Training Institute. Go to prolifetraining.com if you want to find out more. Mike trains young people, speaks in high schools, middle schools. He speaks all across this country, training youth on how to defend the pro-life position in the public square. And we're talking about this controversy at Indiana Wesleyan University with a professor by the name of Dr. Greg Fiebeg, who came out at this forum and basically said he was pro-choice. Now, Mike, the position of the Wesleyans is clear. I mean, I went on the website. In fact, Dr. Fiebeg actually references their position, and they have a fundamental position that affirms the sanctity of human life. So their position as far as a congregation and how they apparently govern this Christian college, is that they're pro-life. So how is it, and maybe you don't know the answer to this, but how is it that a pro-choice professor can even teach at an institution like this?
Well, two responses there. First of all, I commend the university for having a strong pro-life position, and that's great. Again, the question is going to be, will they hold their professors accountable to that position or not? And that remains to be seen at this point. But I think the problem here is even much larger than Christian universities. It's in our pulpits, in our churches. We in the Christian community don't see abortion for the evil that it really is. We tend to see it as, it's not a good thing, it's not ideal, maybe it's even bad, but is it really that big of a deal? It's just another issue for so many professing Christians. But you and I know, Mark, that legalized abortion is not just another issue, it's the defining moral issue of our times. It would be like saying in 1860 that slavery was just another issue. And so what happens on these university campuses frequently is that they've got a good policy statement, but it's not really being taught in the classroom. It's not being defended and put forth in the classroom. And so that vacuum is being filled by professors like Dr. Fiebeg, who come in with aberrant views, biblically, defending the position of child killing.
My guest is Mike Spencer. You can go to Life Training, the website at prolifetraining.com. You're listening to The Mark Harrington Show. Folks, go to my website at createdequal.net. And if you want to watch this video in its entirety, you can go to our YouTube page, watch the entire forum, and also this excerpt of Dr. Fiebeg defending his pro-choice position in front of the student body. Mike, you and Seth, my colleague, wrote a letter to the editor, which is yet to be published. We're going to make that available on social media.
You mean the letter to the Sojourner, to the school newspaper?
Right, correct. Because you're responding to Dr. Fiebeg's letter, putting forth his position after the forum. In that letter, you basically get to the point of questioning the issue of moral relativism. And I want to talk at a broader problem here. Is Indiana Wesleyan University in a vacuum? Is this just an anomaly? It may be. Or is it worse than that? And maybe my listeners are probably thinking to themselves and just shaking their heads saying, so what else is new?
Well, I wish it were an anomaly. The reality is I think this is far more common than either of us would like to believe that it is. So no, I absolutely do not believe it's an anomaly. And you mentioned moral relativism. Dr. Fiebeg made a couple of comments, and I'll just very quickly let me quote him. He said this. He said, "This is our belief that life begins." Well, he said it like this: "This is our belief that life begins at conception. It is not the world's belief." And so, if we start telling the world how to live their lives and hold them to a morality that we believe, that is a little bit akin to playing the Holy Spirit. He goes on then to say, my main thing that I wanted to say tonight is that it's our morality. We can't dump it on other people because the moment we do, we remove their choice from them. He then quoted another pastor, apparently a pastor friend of his, I believe it was, or at least an acquaintance, and he quoted this pastor as saying, quote, "Maybe one of the best things that Christians can do today is to let non-Christians off the moral hook." But again, nobody would say that if we were talking about killing toddlers.
Right.
Nobody would say, well, you know what, I don't like killing toddlers, but that's their right to choose, and we should just let non-Christians off the moral hook. We didn't let Andrea Yates off the moral hook.
Right.
And so then the question becomes, what are the preborn? Are they, according to the science of human embryology, are they indeed distinct, living, and whole human beings? And if so, why are we treating them in the Christian community differently than we're treating toddlers?
Good question. Well, I would say that we have a bigotry of our own, that we don't treat the preborn as the same as the born, even in the Christian community.
Well, and again, it goes back to the fact that we're not thundering this from our pulpit. I've been a pastor, or I was actively pastoring for 23 years, and I know this to be the case, that very few churches are giving this attention in their pulpits. They're viewing it as just another issue. And so people are left to try to figure it out on their own, and this is what we end up with as universities. And again, I don't know how widespread this is at Indiana Wesleyan. I'm not there. I'm not boots on the ground in that school. I don't know. But I do know that there are other universities like this that have got professors on staff like this and are teaching this kind of thing. And we lament the fact that the world is aborting its children, but we can't even stop the Christian community from aborting their children. And if we can't get this right in the university, in our Christian universities, and we can't get it right in our churches, what hope is there that we're going to get it right outside of those walls?
Good point. My guest has been Mike Spencer with Life Training Institute, and you can go to prolifetraining.com if you want to find out more about their about their work there. Mike goes around training youth in pro-life apologetics. Also, folks, if you have a young person in a Christian college, or whether you do or not, contact Indiana Wesleyan University's president, Dr. David Wright, and let him know that you're concerned about the direction of his college as well as the direction of Christian colleges across America. We've got to hold these folks accountable for what they're saying and what they're teaching our young people. You've been listening to The Mark Harrington Show, your loyal opposition here on WRFD. Please go to createdequal.net. You can listen to our program podcasted on iTunes. We'll be back next time at the same place and same time. God bless you. God bless America. And remember, America, to bless God.
You've been listening to Mark Harrington, your radio activist, sponsored by Created Equal. For more information on how to become a witness against the evil plague in America, call Created Equal at 614-269-7808, 614-269-7808, or go online to createdequal.net, createdequal.net. Be sure to tune to The Mark Harrington Show next time for your marching orders in the culture war.